new activities that we have with this European project named Combots that Eleanor already mentioned. And then I will be very happy to have some discussion with you guys on what I have presented. So let me just introduce briefly where our university is located. I know that you had another lecture from a colleague of mine, Fabrizio Taffoni, and so you know, you already knew from him that we are located here in the south part of Rome, outside the annual highway around Rome. We are a pretty new university, established in 1992, and now we have several degrees in medicine and surgery, and also in engineering, and 2 PhD programs for our graduate student, and also other students for the other university. Just to mention that we have in the university, we have this master plan that aims at extending the current facilities in the next 30 years. So if you look at this picture, these 2 circular red rings here highlight the current buildings, and all the animation around here is the situation that we hopefully have in the 2045. So we are new but rapidly growing, I would say. So going to my talk, I'll try to provide some brief overview of all our activities, and in particular talking about the motivation behind our work and our new lab. And then I will give you some example in 3 of the main areas that we are investigating, in particular motor control, understanding brain pathologies, and neurodevelopment. So a few words about motivation. So why we are interested in joining neuroscience and robotics, in particular modern neuroscience and robotics. So I will see this joint effort from 2 different viewpoints. So the first one is from the viewpoint of neuroscience, and when I asked neuroscientists why most of the neuroscience around the world deal with the motor neuroscience, they answered me that motor control is not one of the main functions of the brain, but is probably the reason why the nervous system has been created. And a classical example of this is the Squirt, which is this animal or vegetable, depending on the viewpoint you are considering. That at the beginning, when it is in its larval form, it has a brain-like structure of 300 cells that enables it to move around to find a good substrate. And when it finds it, it buries its head and reabsorbs its own brain, because it does not need anymore to move. And from an engineering viewpoint, there are lots of roboticians around the world that are very interested in studying how the human brain controls movement. And the reason for that, I think, is given by the great discrepancy that we have between the strange and clumsy movement of the robot that we control and the easy of the movement of people. So here I have a couple of videos regarding few of the most advanced robots in the world, both for controlling very fine motor movements, like opening a bottle and then draw some water in the glass, and one of the most interesting dynamic robots that can run and jump and do like several nice stuff by Boston Dynamics. But when you compare similar tasks that humans can do, like This is a tournament of cup stacking, and this little young girl can mount and unmount the cup in few seconds. And as regards running, here we have the fastest man in the world, Usain Bolt, winning I think is the Olympics in 2008. And as you can see, the difference between the best robot we have in the world and human movement is still very, very, yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but we supposed to see a video?
Yeah, you don't see the video here? Oh. Ah, wait. Probably
We still see the slide with.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first one?
I haven't seen any video.
I'm
sorry, I should have said before.
Mm-hmm. So let me. I was sharing the whole screen. Can you see my screen?
It's loading. Now, yes, we see the whole screen.
Okay, so you have just seen the first slide, right?
The slides. No, we did see the slides till here. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Can you see the videos?
Now it's fine. Yes.
Are they running?
Yes.
Okay. So it was just the comparison between robots movement and human movement, and of course you can see how far actually how behind us are the robot with respect to our movement. And this is even more intriguing if you consider the difference in hardware performance between robots and humans. So you have in robots, you have high-level feedback that lasts less than 1 millisecond, so you can implement control at 1 kilohertz, while high-level feedback delay in humans are above 100 milliseconds. Also for low-level feedback, you have like controller at 10 kilohertz, while in humans you have low-level feedback above 20 milliseconds. And also the communication velocity is roughly close to the velocity of speed, while in humans is far from the velocity of sound. And also the same for actuator bandwidth. So this is what Neville Logan calls the paradox of human performance. And this is what motivated us to study how human control and execute movements. So we established this lab in 2016 together with Giovanni Di Pino, who is a neuroscientist. I have a background in biomedical engineering, so we founded this joint lab, which is, as Eleonora already told you in the presentation, is made by neuroscientists, by engineering, neurologists, by psychologists, and several other people from different backgrounds. So as regard activities, I will say that we have mainly 3 areas of research. The first one, I already mentioned a little bit about it, is human motor control. So study how humans perform and execute movements, and to study it, we use robotics technology. Then we have the part of studying brain pathologies and try to modeling brain pathologies. And then we have a part of our work dedicated to neurodevelopment. So how the motor control develops during the early stage of our life, and also in older children. You see here a video of myself with my second daughter, and I think Fabrizio already extensively described this work. I'm not going to talk anymore about it, but I'll talk about other projects. And in this area, we have several research topics going on. I will try to give an example of each of these three, let's say, branches of research of the lab. Starting from human motor control, which is one of the first part of my career, and one of the most things that I've investigated at the beginning of my academic career. So I'll start about the work related to understanding how the brain controls wrist movements during redundant tasks, and how this research that we have. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Okay. And how this research can be useful to design better robots in the field of rehabilitation robotics. So we have studied wrist movements using a very simple task, which is like pointing with a virtual pointer to a screen. Here there is a sensor that can follow wrist movement during this task. And of course, pointing task is a 2 degrees of freedom task, while the wrist and the forearm, including forearm protension supination, is a 3 degrees of freedom task. So we were interested in understanding how the brain solved this redundant problem. And we found basically that similarly to what is done for the eye movement, which is a quite similar task. So the eye can move, the eyes can move in 3 degrees of freedom, but the gaze is a task that requires only 2 degrees of freedom. And similarly to that movement, the rotation of the wrist tend to lie on a curved surface. And we have called this Donder surface in similar to the Donder's law for the eyes that I was mentioning before. And we have tested different subjects, and so that for each subject, these surfaces that represents how the brain implement this redundancy solution is quite stable for each subject, but it somehow varies from subject to subject, indicated the presence of a personal motor style in solving this kind of task. And when we try to analyze the same thing in interaction with a wrist robot for rehabilitation, we found that in that case, the wrist robot somehow perturbs human movement while it is not supposed to do it. So basically, when we execute the same kind of task with just this handheld device, very lightweight, or in interaction with the robot, we found that this personal motor style in solving the redundancy it disappears because the robot imposes its own kinematics on the top on the human motor strategy. So somehow the robot perturbs natural movement of the humans. And for this reason, we try to overcome this problem by implementing mechatronic solution. So we basically instrumented the robot on below its handle with the 4 sensors, and tried to implement a control law that minimize, reduce, and minimize the interaction forces between the robot and the subject. In this way, we were able to reduce the perceived inertia of the robot of about 70%, And what happened is that, so when the robot is not controlled with our force control, basically the subject is able to execute the task, but is not moving at all one of the degrees of freedom, which is pronation supination, because probably the perceived inertia of the robot in that degree of freedom is too high to let the subject to use it during this task. While when you compensate for the interaction force, you can see that the robot follow subject intention, and the subject can again move and perform this pointing task, moving the pronation supination. We also test in the same way as we did with the fitting the Donder surface, with and without the robot, and with and without our solution, or with the robot without any additional control. And we saw that in the controller robot, we somehow regain the personal motor style, and we have like the thickness values, which is how well the subject follow this surface, are back to the physiological range that we have observed without the robot, so with the natural motor movement. Another part of investigating human motor control is related to study the control of joint impedance. So there is lots of literature related to how it's important for the brain during interaction tasks to regulate the impedance of the body in interaction with the external world. The impedance is basically the mechanical resistance of our joint when they are, how can I say, when they are they are interacting with the external world, and there is some exchange of forces with the external world. So it is known that by coactivating muscle, we can increase joint impedance, or in particular situation, we can relax body impedance to allow for complying with the external constraints. So this has been first proposed by Neville Hogan back in early 80s, and he showed that the brain can stabilize unstable tasks by co-contracting muscles. I'm not going to detail of this paper, but if you are interested, I can tell you more. And then it is the same concept has been also investigated in the beginning of 2000 by Etienne Bourdet, this group, that show that when you are interacting with an unstable force field, basically your mechanical impedance is adapting to the external disturbance, let's say, by increasing the hand perceived impedance only along that direction. If you see these ellipses here, these represent in the space the direction of maximum stiffness and minimum stiffness. So before the exposure to this perturbation that comes from the side here, this is the geometrical characteristic of the stiffness, meaning that this is the direction of higher stiffness, and this is the direction of lower stiffness. When the subject adapts to this external perturbation that comes from the side, basically after the adaptation, the brain increases the impedance only against this direction of instability. And this is also been shown using force field coming from different directions. It's quite consistent, the result. So basically, the brain control mechanical impedance of the joint by co-contracting muscle to comply with the external constraint. This is a model proposed by Hogan and Sternad in 2012, suggesting that we may, during interaction, we can plan to have roughly straight movement, and then we can let the geometric characteristic of hand impedance to comply with a kinematic constraint, which is this black line here. So the brain, like opening a door. So the brain can plan to do like a couple of straight movements to the left and then down, and having these complying with the circular constraint by letting the mechanical impedance with the constraint to adjust for it. For this reason, we start investigated again in wrist movement, what are the geometrical characteristics of wrist stiffness, and this has been done in collaboration with Nevi Logan's lab at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and we basically use a robotic device to perturb wrist joint, and by measuring the displacement of the perturbation and the torques that the robot needs to apply to the wrist to deviate it from his resting position, we can infer what is the geometrical characteristic of the wrist impedance, and we described it for the first time in 2012. What is this stiffness leap for the wrist in ST subject, and we found basically that the direction of wrist stiffness is this one between ulnar flexion and radial extension, which is also known as the natural wrist axis, is known as the dart thrower motion. So meaning that the brain can take advantage of the direction of wrist stiffness for using the wrist during common wrist rotations. So how this ends the first part of my talk related to the study. Actually, I did a selection of our studies on human motor control, and I would like to move on brain pathology. So using similar technology, we try to study how the wrist stiffness is in patient with the Parkinson disease, and this is because, you know, here I assume some of the characteristics of Parkinson disease. I'm not going to say much about it, but the most important thing is that Parkinson disease has three main symptoms. It is bradykinesia, rigidity, and tremor. So joint rigidity is one of the cardinal symptoms. And you see that there are lots of covered symptoms before the diagnosis. So probably the Parkinson, I will say for sure, the disease starts well before the diagnosis, but you can make with current instruments, clinical instruments, you can have the diagnosis only when the motor symptoms became clear. So there is a need to have a better assessment of these symptoms, and one of them, as I said, is the joint rigidity. This video shows how it is usually assessed during clinical examination. So basically by moving patient joint, and it is defined, the rigidity it is defined like an increased resistance when the clinician is moving the joint passively. And it is one of, actually there are few items in the UPDRS clinical scale, which is a clinical scale widely used for Parkinson's disease. And we thought to have, as we done for healthy subject, we thought to have a robotic device that can allow to freely move when we don't need to measure the wrist stiffness, while it can be used for perturbing the movement during measurement. So this is a project founded by the Italian Ministry of Health, aiming at having a device, designing and testing a device for at-home assessment of Parkinson's disease patients. And we have designed this prototype of wrist exoskeleton, which can be, I would say, highly optimized with respect to this first prototype. But as you can see, it is fully wearable, both the mechanical part with the motor for providing the perturbation, and also the electronic cells, all the embedded controller useful to manage the whole device, both controlling the motor, gaining, acquiring the data, and then transmitting via Bluetooth module. And we designed so far this wearable robot with one actuated DOF, degrees of freedom, and we are able with this device to provide an active mechanical perturbation around wrist flexion extension. We have tested so far this robot on 7 PD patients and compared the results with 14 age-matched healthy control. Basically, the setup currently requires the subject to relax, as usually done during the clinical examination for assessing joint rigidity. So the subject is seated and relaxes wrist, and then the robot provides this trapezoidal perturbation and with 5 repetition around flexion and extension of the wrist. And of course, we compare this result with the clinical assessment provided by the UPDRS scale. So basically, we have a quite simple estimation of the stiffness. We start from the neutral position there, then apply the perturbation and take the linear part of the angle torque curve and approximate with the linear regression the relation between the angle torque using this linear model and obtaining the stiffness. And we divided between perturbation towards extension and perturbation towards flexion. These are the results. So basically, you can see that there is a clear, I forgot to mention that we repeated for each subject the measurement in 2 conditions: before medication with the L-DOPA. So basically is what we call off phase, because the patient is without medication, and 1 hour after the administration of levodopa, which is supposed to be the period of time where the drug has its maximum effect on the patient. As you can see, between off and on phase, there is a clear effect on the overall UPDRS score, but there is no clear effect on the rigidity. So if we isolate only the score for right arm rigidity, we see that there is some difference, but it is not statistically significant. While using our device, we can see a clear difference between, of course, PD patient than controls, with the PD patient having a higher stiffness. And we can see a decrease of stiffness only in the extension. So only in the stiffness towards extension between the on and off condition. Anyway, while we don't see any difference in the estimation of stiffness towards flexion. Anyway, it is known from previous studies that L-DOPA has a higher effect on wrist flexor than extensor. And I recall here that when you estimate the stiffness towards extension, that stiffness is done by the flexor muscle, which are the muscle that you are stretching. So this is somehow consistent with what is known about levodopa effect on rigidity. So basically, we can see an effect on the KE, which is the stiffness toward extension, because the levodopa has higher effect on the flexor. So we'll move. I think I have other 10 minutes, so I will move on towards the last part of my talks related to the use of robotic technologies to study neurodevelopment. As I said, we have studied several aspects of neurodevelopment, and most of this work has been done with my colleague Fabrizio Taffoni, that presented to you his work on this topic. I'm not going to, of course, repeat that part, but I'm going to talk about this new project that we have just got founded by the European Commission. Is called Combots, and actually it is new in the sense that we have started in the last year, but I mean the project has officially started the 1st January of 2020, so it is more than 1 year, but in the middle, soon after the kickoff meeting, which was like mid of February last year, after 1 week, we had the first lockdown, the first COVID case in Italy, and the first lockdown started at the end of February. So I would say that the project has just started because we had a lot of problem in starting the activities during the pandemic, of course. Anyway, the project is aimed at designing and testing a new class of robots that we call the Combots, which are the robots that physically couple people, and they will be applied to learning new motor skills, such as playing a new instrument or learning how to handwrite. The project is quite big and involves several institutions around Europe. There are 7 partners around Europe. The rationale of using robots that couple people comes from study mainly done by Etienne's Bourdet group. Saying that when you are try to do a motor task and use the robot to transmit the force of one subject to the other. So in the picture you see here, you have like this green robot that is applying a force proportional to the position of this other robot that is interacting with the other subject, and vice versa, meaning that the 2 subjects are somehow connected with a sort of mechanical stiffness between them, while they are doing the same task, like following this target on the screen. So Etienne's group has shown that when coupled, partners have less tracking error, and that the human-human interaction improves the performance both for the partner which is more skilled and for the partner who is less skilled. The reason is that probably, at least this is how they model it, is that the partner can understand each subject can understand partner's motion and use those information as a sort of increased sensory capabilities to improve his performance. So we thought to use the same concept, integrating different technologies like Apti workstation for handwriting and Exoskeleton for music experiment, a bidirectional user interface integrating AR-based, so augmented reality-based serial games and wearable sensor to record the intention and the physiological state of the subject. We have, among partners, we have IBM, which should provide like machine learning tools to modulate robots' behavior on the basis of subject performance. And all this concept is built around this game theory of physical communication that is developed, actually is in the phase of being developed by the Imperial College of London, Bourdet Group, with our collaboration at UCBM. And the application will be, as I mentioned, in two areas. The first one is handwriting learning, and the second one is music learning. So to conclude, I will show, so this is a project, as I said, it's just started, and so far we haven't applied this concept to children, but we have started some preliminary experiment in our lab with adults. And I'm going to close my talk by showing our preliminary results. So basically, we're trying to see if the same results that Imperial College Group obtained from simple tasks can be generalized to more complex tasks. So basically, the study by Ganesh Takagi from this group from Imperial College have been done in 1 degree of freedom or 2 degrees of freedom tasks. And we try to extend these to 3 degrees of freedom task. And also what they have shown is that the level of the stiffness of the interaction significantly modulates the performance. But they only try to have like symmetric interaction. So the same stiffness is seen from both partners at the same level. We try to do a step further in this picture by, as I mentioned, analyze 3 degrees of freedom tasks, so vertical plane translation and rotation around the sagittal axis. Also investigating movements against gravity that they haven't done so far, and also try to see what is the influence of having an asymmetric interaction. So basically, if the two subjects are coupled by this mechanical stiffness among them, we are trying to set the stiffness not to be equal, but to be different. So this is because when you look at their results, you see that if you put the partner relative errors, so the performance of the partner with respect to the improvement during the coupled task, you see that basically if the partner is better than you, you have higher improvement when you have a hard connection. While when the partner is inferior, the highest connection provides you a sort of decreasing of performance. While if you have a soft connection, you will perform better. So we are trying to test if an asymmetric stiffness can somehow combine these red line here in the left, in the right part of the plot, with this green line here in the left part of the plot. So this is the task we are implementing using two robots in the lab. So basically, each subject is trying to following this blue target here, both in translation, vertical and horizontal, and orientation of this diamond here, diamond shape target. And we test different conditions in terms of coupling. So we had like one condition where the two subjects has a high level of stiffness both on the same level, or a low level of stiffness at the same level, or two other conditions where the subject are coupled with an asymmetric connection, so high and low stiffness, and the opposite. So the other subject as the subject that before had the low stiffness now as the high stiffness, and vice versa. And the same thing for rotational stiffness. This is the experimental procedure. So we have alternation between solo and coupled trial. So the solo trial where the subject is not interacting with the others. The coupled, of course, they are doing the same task together with this physical connection. And the coupled trials are randomly assigned to one of these 4 levels. We also record the EMG of main arm muscle to see the effect of this modulation of the stiffness in the contraction level. And basically, these are the preliminary results. So you here see the condition where the two subjects has the same stiffness at high value, the same stiffness low value, and the condition where the subjects are coupled with high low and low high, so with the asymmetric stiffness. In the x-axis, you can see the partner's relative error, meaning that the partner if it is positive, the partner is performing, when solo, is performing better than you. If it is negative, the partner is performing worse than you. And while in the y-axis, you have the improvement during the coupled trial. So as you can see, the improvement is basically above 0, meaning that roughly in all conditions, all the subjects improve when they are coupled with respect than when they are in a single condition. To understand better the effect of the single performance on the different level of stiffness, we have divided basically the partner, the subject in 3 classes. The first one is when the two subjects, the couple has the same performance among partners. Then there is the part of the subject that are coupled with a better partner, and the part of the subject that are coupled with a bad partner. And this is to analyze the effect of the different level of modulation of the stiffness in the performance. And so what we have seen so far is that if the two subjects are equal in terms of performance, basically there is no effect on the stiffness level. So they all improve. So the improvement is on average above 0, but there is no effect of the different level of stiffness. When you are coupled with a good partner, so you are the worst one and you are coupled with a good partner, the improvement is higher if the partner stiffness is high. So basically, regardless of the fact that you have an high or low stiffness, you have the improvement, this red block here, similar to this light blue block here, which is significantly higher than the two other conditions, meaning that when I'm not good in doing that task, I need to see a higher interaction with the partner. On the contrary, when you are coupled with a bad partner, the improvement is lower when you have a high stiffness and the partner has a low stiffness. So meaning that if I'm coupled with a bad partner, and if I have a lot of effect from his movement and she has lower effect from my movement, the performance during the coupled task are lower than the other condition. I will skip the data on the EMG. We are still analyzing it and would like to conclude. So basically what we have seen so far is that basically the data in trade-off task pretty much confirm that the improvement during physical human-human interaction. We have tried to simulate, at least to consider a interaction between persons that have different level of skill, as we will see between the student and teacher in the future application. So we have saw that when one is coupled with a better partner, which should be the teacher, the improvement is higher when the connection with the partner is stronger. I'll not say much about the EMG since I skipped the results, but still there is some doubt about the role of this asymmetric stiffness, if it is needed or not in our application. So we are trying to investigate what happened with partners with very different skill to simulate the teacher and student interaction. And we are doing that by adding a visual noise on the target to have one of the two partners, to make more difficult for one of the two partners to follow the target, so somehow to simulate how a teacher will interact with a student in the future. So I'm concluding here. This is my last slide. I hope I somehow show you and convinced you that there is this two-way interaction between robotics and neuroscience. From one side, we use robotic tool to investigate neuroscience. Here I also put a video on one of our system. I didn't have much time to show you it, but to show you this part of our research, but it's basically a TMS, a transcranial magnetic stimulation system, driven by a robot, just to have the procedures automated, so capable to following head movement. We have just published a paper on transactional biomedical engineering few weeks ago, so if you are interested, I can give you some info about it. So we have tools for studying neuroscience, and on the other part, we have the neuroscience findings that should help us to design better robots. So to use the knowledge we have about motor neuroscience to improve the way we design robots and systems. And with this, I'm closing my talk. I'm sorry if I've been a little bit late, maybe 5 minutes late, and I'm happy to take your question.
Thank you for your talk. Let's see if anyone has a question. Something that I can ask them, I'm curious if you're, obviously the thing that I'm thinking about is whether you can relate this to any functional brain imaging. So it would be very interesting, especially the last part of the learning sorry, the interaction with the robot, whether there's any also with any maybe EEG measurement, if you can see any different activation of the brain, if or also if there's any learning with time.
Actually, we have some part of the research in the lab using during this similar kind of task. So, for example, while learning force field in interaction with the robot, using EEG to map brain dynamics during the learning process. And for sure, there is a lot of room there for investigation, and we are currently running like 3 or 4 experiments in that direction. These experiments are not led by me because I'm not the expert about EEG, but Giovanni with his group is doing. He's working a lot on body representation and embodiment of external tools, like in amputees, like the embodiment of robotic hands. And in that part, he is investigating how the EEG activation varies over time during learning of new tasks. Yeah, so there is lots of research also in that area.
Oh, did anyone? No. Okay. I was wondering also the robot, the wearable robot. How would you envision that to be able to be wear by a child? Like, what would be the struggle? Because I guess that's right now it's probably quite heavy, right?
Yeah, I mean that part of the project is the most challenging, of course, as you can imagine. So we basically will have two class of robots. The first one is sort of like I will say actuated pen for the handwriting, and we are testing currently with the partner that is developing it, which is Imperial College in London. We are testing a device which is cable driven, so very lightweight, and it seemed to be promising. So for handwriting, this should be possible to do some sort of similar experiment using this sort of mechanical coupling. The most challenging part is on exoskeleton, of course. So we have a group that the responsible for that is a group inside the consortium, which is the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna in Pisa, and they are expert in exo design. Of course, we have done some very preliminary tests with the technology they already have, and of course it's not suitable in this situation for children. They are trying to scale it down, and we are doing a lot of, let's say, trade-off in designing the system. So one positive aspect is that this physical interaction is driven by very low forces. So it is more like communicating partners' movements than applying real force to drive the movement. Sorry. So what we have measured so far is that the interaction force, for example, in the 3 degrees of freedom task, are around 1 Newton, which is quite low. So we are trying to design a very small actuator and scaling down the technology they have. Probably we're going to simplify a lot the number of degrees of freedom on the interaction. So probably for the wiring experiment that you have saw in the concept there, this one. I'm still sharing my screen, right?
Yeah.
This one, we will have only 1 or 2 degrees of freedom in the interaction. So basically the wrist flexion, the elbow flexion extension, the shoulder elbow flexion extension. But you are right, this is the most challenging part of the whole project, and we are still facing it and try to understand how to do it properly.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
This is Jeff Stout. Fascinating talk. It's made me think about a lot of things kind of outside of the examples you've given. But I'm curious about kind of your thinking about the limits of some of this learning. I mean, so one way to ask the question is like, is the motor learning durable in the sense that once you are released from this kind of system where you're training, that those motor tasks continue to show improvement? And then that's coupled with the whole variety of questions about, you know, who makes a good teacher and what's actually happening here. Is there some sort of, you know, kind of higher level brain function that's involved, or is this very kind of basic, just kind of what we'd call, you know, muscle memory? I'm sorry, it's such a layman's term, but you understand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great point because I don't have a clear answer to that, in the sense that most of the experiment we and other groups have done before are not related to learning, but just to the improvement of the performance during the interaction with respect to the performance without the interaction, meaning that it could be also possible that there is no learning there. So in the sense that when you take the get rid of the interaction, the improvement is completely lost. Hopefully this will not be the case. Actually, we have started investigating about learning with very different experimental procedures. So having different session in different days and see how much are you able to retain about learning the previous day with respect to the following one. And there are a few experiments running in these months. I would say joint experiment between us and the Imperial College looking specifically on the learning process. So data I showed so far are not related to learning, but just to improvement during couple. And one of the main scientific point is exactly what you have just asked. So is possible to have a useful learning in this kind of interaction? How much of this learning you can retain over the days, and if this is will be also the case if it is present in let's say healthy adults. We need to investigate if it will be the case also in the teacher-student interaction. So far I don't have an answer to your point, but it's one of the main scientific points that we are facing in this months.
That's just really fascinating. If I can ask one follow-up, and that again is about kind of the limits of this, is like what sort of tasks? I mean, the tasks you showed are all fairly simple. Do you have a sense of kind of the degree of task complexity that you could kind of expect to see similar improvements on before this?
Yeah. So the fact that we have started testing this trade-off task is in the direction of try to understand if this can be generalized to more complex tasks, because previous studies have shown only improvements in very simple tasks. Most of the study have been done in 1 degrees of freedom task, like wrist flexion extension, which is quite interesting in terms of proof of concept. But then when you need to scale up and go into the real life application, you need to have a more complex, of course, task, and also more complex interaction between subjects. So the first attempt that we have done with this 3 degrees of freedom task, it tried to make one step per time, make the task a little bit more complicated. And I would say quite surprisingly, if you look at the results, it is, I mean, the fact that the interaction really improve coupled performance with respect, then the solo performance is very consistent. So we have seen it in different tasks with different equipment, different robots, an experiment which is completely independent to all the previous experiment, and the improvement is still there. So again, we are trying to let's say scale up the complexity of this investigation from the very simplified task to more complex tasks. I would say that the first results are quite promising, showing that this improvement during interaction is quite consistent across several subjects, different platforms, different tasks, different kind of robotic of interaction and so on. So I'm again, we are still investigating it, but I'm quite positive about the possibility to use it for more complex tasks.
I really admire your incremental approach, so thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Domenico. We're a little bit out of time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this nice series of lecture, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.